All right, so we started recording. Hi, and welcome back to Politodoxy. I'm your host, Aaron Friedman. Today we have Robert Wallace, the leader of the Arizona chapter of Gays Against Groomers. I would like first to thank you for making your appearance here. It's always great to have new guests. And I would like first to have you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Aaron, and for the attention of your listeners. My name is Robert Wallace, I'm the Arizona chapter lead for Gays Against Groomers, and so I'm running our Arizona state chapter.
All right, so let me see here. So we have been seeing the deterioration of society ever since the 1960s. That's where I like to put it. Most of the problems, at least it metastasized much since the 60s, and the the we've seen a lot of problems that has been growing in the classrooms, especially. And why I'm pointing at the 60s is because the I think it was 1965 where the Supreme Court said that you cannot invoke God in the public schools. You cannot talk about that. You could talk about all kinds of other things, terrible things, but you cannot talk about God. And I think the prayer there was a special prayer, and it was a case in New York. The prayer, as I recall, was something went something like, "We ask, we the children of the school, we beg our Father in heaven or God, whatever, not naming any specific God, just God in general, that our teachers, um, our parents, and our principals, so on, whatever, that all good luck be blessed upon them." Something like that. Went something like that. Nothing too extreme. Nothing specific. Although I would assume people in the South, where they were more religious, they would actually do say specifically one specific god. They were more Christian, so they would probably pray to a Christian god. But in general, a it was just a general god. But Supreme Court said you can't do that. But apparently there is no problem with having children being taught all kinds of sexual perversion, all kinds of terrible things. And I've seen the teachers utterly deteriorate from where we came from, the 1950s up until this point. I thought my camera is connecting. Okay, it's working. All right. So we've seen the deterioration from our teachers. They have completely taken away all responsibility from teaching the children about the important things. And by the way, not all of the things that even they used to teach then would have been useful, but at the very least, it didn't corrupt the young minds. It At the worst, some of the things would have been just a waste of time. So I would like to ask you about what do you see as being the answer to getting the right people, the right teachers, the right principals, and um, getting parents to be more aware what's actually happening with their children, because they're I mean in liberal families, especially in New York and California, they I would assume at the very least, although they are liberal, I would assume they would want to protect their children even from the perversion that we see nowadays. But they don't. But they are what I call the low oxygen liberals. Why do I call them that? Because it is the media that is feeding them. Oh, look, the Republicans are trying to overthrow democracy. Oh, the Republicans, they are challenging elections. Oh, look, the Republicans are racist, and so on. They're depriving them of a moment of to breathe. So they see the Republicans as the ultimate enemy. So they're scared. So they can't stop and think for a moment what's actually happening, and they're scared. They're absolutely scared. So I would assume, not I would assume, sorry. So the problem is that they are scared and they don't, so they are looking at one thing, they're being distracted. Look over here, but meanwhile they're being distracted on one subject, the other subject of their kids being corrupted. They just don't know it. So how would you? So the question is multifaceted. One, I would like to know, what do you think about how do we get the right people in the jobs, and how do we spread awareness among the liberal audience? The conservative audience, they know exactly what's going on, but how do we spread to the liberal audience what's actually happening?
Well, those are great questions. So, first and foremost, and I wish, right off the bat I knew exactly what I was going to be referring to. There is an organization which suits certain educational teachers, and they have a protocol, they have guidelines that their teachers have to comply with. And this organization is responsible for putting teachers in the schools. And again, I wish I could name it because this is going to be nearly useless to say this, but there are organizations which are preparing teachers to be essentially woke or very progressive in their ideology. And so we do seem to have a stream of educational leaders who are coming from certain sources that have this ideology that is really infecting us right now. So I don't think it's by chance that they're just appearing in the schools, or that teachers tend to want to operate in this way. It seems like there's a new breed of teachers coming in, and that's the problem. So when it comes to getting the right people in, um, this does go back up to the school board level. This goes up to a level where, in order to make a change and to do something about this, we need people who are aware of what's going on at the school board level, who can vet and these teachers, or make sure that their vetting process is being held to a specific standard where they don't have agendas or pet agendas, basically tied to what they're doing. And so, because what happens is a teacher gets in, and then you've got the parents who are upset, and then the parents go to the teacher, who sends them to the principal, who can't do anything or for whatever reason protects them. So they go to the school board, and that's where the parents are gathering. That's where the ruckus is made, because here we have a board of decision makers, and these are the people who are ultimately going to have the power to make those types of changes. Unfortunately, there's not a quick path to it. And other than, for instance, making sure that if you can't do anything about it, maybe the option is to take your kid to another school if it's an option, or to homeschool. Um, but that is a problem, is getting people with sensible thinking in a position of leadership or decision making position where they can do something about these teachers. And then aside of that, parents and anybody concerned participating at the school board level, raising issues. This teacher is doing this teacher has these flags up, this teacher is putting up these assignments. And when you make it open to everybody, you can get some buy-in from the other parents. You can get some momentum to make some changes by putting it out in the open. And I think that also goes as far as spreading awareness in our communications with people. Whether we're talking to people on a non-political person, an independent person, a liberal person, or a conservative person who actually doesn't, understand what's going on from, at least our perspective, the gays against groomers sense, there is a period of educating them. So it just takes a quick conversation, letting individuals know that, look, you don't have to be anti-gay, anti-trans, to think that maybe we should tone it down in the schools big time. There's nothing homophobic or transphobic about saying we shouldn't have a drag queen story hour. We shouldn't have kids at pride parades. We shouldn't have kids at drag shows. We shouldn't have pornographic, sexually explicit literature in the name of gay sex education in the schools. We shouldn't be promoting what really does amount to, with this gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia, the autism attached to this transgender identity. It really is a mental contagion. It's a mental situation that's turned into a social contagion through being embraced and validated in the schools. So when we're asking the kids, what are your pronouns? Or what pronouns do you want me to use in front of your parents? We're at that level. they're feeding into it, they're spreading it. And so bringing up these issues to most people, regardless of their persuasion, unless they are, and this is where I really think it comes down to a mental compass. You either got one or you don't. Some people don't see any problem with a sex positive life, with taking their kids to a nudist camp, with their kids seeing drag shows or seeing anything else on account of maybe how prevalent it is in the world or how prevalent it is in other media. So some parents don't even have any reservations about it. But most people will say to themselves, hey, I wouldn't take my kid to a burlesque show. So why would a man in a dress acting in the same way be any better? Most people would agree that I don't want my kids exposed to heterosexual pornographic imagery in school in the name of sex ed. And yet that has got to pass because they're gay, because they're trans, or whatever the excuse is that we're going to have this double standard. And so, for most people, once you kind of set this out there and you say, okay, this is about children, this isn't about shutting down Pride for Adults, whether or not you agree with it, we all agree that adults can and should be able to make their own decisions. It's part of being free. And if you want to identify as trans or whatever, particularly as an adult, again, that's your life journey, and you should be equipped for life by that time to be able to manage those decisions. But when you start to give this idea and these decisions over to kids who don't even understand that they're not Superman, who don't understand that what permanent means, irreversible means, who don't understand how time works and the development of the mind, what you have are individuals who are incapable of consenting being given the power to consent to things that even full blown adults can come away regretting. So most people realize, hey, this isn't a child's decision, and that's how you're going to wake people up. They're going to know you're not homophobic, you're not transphobic, you're simply doing common sense care for the kids.
What's your opinion on if a child, when or if a child should be a person? How about this? A person should be able to chop their genitals off and identify with the other sex.
Well, I would point out, just as a measure of how some of the other parts of the world are handling this, I believe it's in Indonesia or Thailand, but you have to be at least 21 years old. You have to have the permission of your parent and a psychiatrist and a doctor, or a doctor for the court to allow you to make that decision. So it's something that is even done very carefully for somebody who is above the age of majority. I just, in another way that I want to come at this question is to point out my former Arizona chapter co-lead, Matt Ray, actually transitioned from female to male at the age of 26, and now at the age of 32, he's almost a year into detransitioning. Now, this is a mistake that a full-blown adult made. So, how much more susceptible are kids? This individual is now medicalized to no end, constantly in pain, constantly suffering, can't do half of the things in life that he wants to do because now, even if he stops the processes, the medicine he was on, like a girl, he's not going to be able to recover his true sexuality, and now is like living out this mistake that can't be undone. And so the lesson here is to listen to the detransitioners. And when the detransitioners are saying, look, mistakes are made all around the way, particularly with kids, there really is no right time for a child to make, in short, to make that decision. And even as an adult, that's a very
Well,
uh, dangerous, questionable decision. So
here's
I would
here's what I
definitely
think
say
about
not at
the
all.
entire transitioning thing. It's by biology again. I'm how much I hate the word science, and the reason why I hate the word science, it's so overused nowadays. It's become a cliche. I hate cliche, so that's the one of the reasons that I actually hate science. The word science, like everybody is using it, invoking authority. It's basically experts say without actually naming the experts and actually showing the evidence. Just saying experts say, and now I'm allowed to say whatever I want to say. So it's basically science. But regardless of that, I just wanted to point that out. But regardless of that, the just purely scientifically speaking, biologically speaking, it's impossible to transition from one to the other. Now, you want to live the different lifestyle. Well, I can't stop you to live a different lifestyle. Well, I guess that is your choice. But you mentioned earlier doctors that a doctor should be involved. Question is, is would a doctor be actually a good doctor to if the doctor agrees that yes, you know what, you should transition when we know, first of all, it's impossible to actually be that. It actually increases the chance of suicide. We've seen this actually happen. That actually the rate of suicide increases after that. And also, what about do no harm? So there's a whole host of issues that fall here into this category. So the question is, would you say, look, again, I appreciate where you're coming from. You're actually, I kind of agree with you. Let's take the baby steps. I'm I want to first take the baby steps. I think it should be completely outlawed, in my opinion. But let's first take the baby steps. A doctor should be involved, yes, because we live in a culture that, or in a society that, just outlawing completely would bring out um, is an amount of violence that I could not imagine, especially from one side of the political aisle. So what I say is, let's take baby steps. A doctor, okay, let's put a doctor in there. And the doctor's main work should be to persuade not to do it. But you can't nowadays. You can't as a psychiatrist. As a matter of fact, as a psychiatrist, you can't do that because there are laws prohibiting. You can say you are the other. You can say you are gay. You are trans. You are whatever made up pronoun that is, but you can't say no, this is what you were born. Just I understand you feel you don't feel comfortable in this body, but we can figure this out. First of all, limit Instagram, limit Twitter, limit all of the social media, limit that out, and you'll find yourself much more natural. That is one thing, because it is, to an extent, it is a social contagion. To an extent, it's not completely, but to an extent. But I agree with you on the doctor issue. That first, let's take the step. A doctor should be involved and should try to persuade the young adult. And I would say, again, I want it outlawed. But at the moment, we'll take this small step. Try to persuade the young adult to not do it. So, what would you? But the question is, would that doctor, if the doctor is like, okay, you know what? I agree with you. Would that doctor be a good doctor? Would you be able to say that this doctor has done his job?
Well, what I will say is, I think we categorically agree with the idea, especially for children, that or particularly with children, that the whole transing thing should be illegal for them. I do agree with you on that. When it comes to young adults and adults doing their own thing, we, whether they're young people or they're older people, we have, like you're mentioning with the psychiatrist, they have this gender affirming care model that basically allows them to approve and validate and affirm your psychiatric uh, uh, well, what is a disorder? And there was actually a video I just posted, and it was a series of detransitioners discussing how they had gone through the process. They'd spoken to psychologists. They went through this process, and what they were finding is that they were constantly not just being affirmed, but they were basically made to diagnose themselves throughout every step of the process because they can't be um, invalidated. They can't have their psychological state questioned. So in a real way, and the reason why I'm being careful about this is because Gays Against Groomers is focused on children. And we do understand that, and there are individuals within our organization that have all kinds of feelings on this when it comes to especially adults. We ourselves, at least in this capacity, aren't commenting on what adults do because that's not our battle. And once you're an adult, people are going to make all kinds of choices. The real delineator here in and our focus toward kids is that they cannot consent. They cannot comprehend or understand the magnitude of this decision. So, in one sense, the gender affirming care model is definitely dangerous. It's the social contagion aspect of validating all of these non binary and other genders through media, through cartoons, and books, and even the kind of uh, really the propagandizing and the indoctrination that's being done in the schools. All of this is very detrimental to the kids' health, obviously. It's convincing them that they're something that they're not, which leads to crazy decisions. And most importantly, it's leading to kids walking themselves on a path where they can be unsupervised by their parents, and where another adult who is very pro trans can come and take them by the hand and help them down this path, an irreversible path. And by the time they've taken so many steps in, by the time their parent even finds out, these kids are already on puberty blockers, or they're already at some stage in transitioning. And of course, that's a huge matter to keep a parent out of that decision, because most parents would protect their children like baby cubs, and they would protect them from the ideology, from the very thought, and from really developing into that. So you got to take the kids away from, the parents' purview or from their oversight in order to sow these ideas in, cultivate it in their mind, and even sometimes help them take these steps secretly. Um, so, in that sense, I would say that I do think that the whole doctor medical industry has become so compromised, and that's one of the things Gays Against Groomers is fighting. It's not a matter of medically validating people. This is a mental condition, it's a mental health condition. When you're older and you're an adult, if you want to live it out and make that your truth, you can do that. But as a kid, they cannot be denied sound medical intervention, sound therapeutic uh, uh, discussions that are going to help them ease their way out of this condition. And that's what's happening right now. So,
If you don't mind me asking, what's your political persuasion?
Um, I will disclose that, but I would just say, I would just preface it by letting people know and reminding them Gays Against Groomers ourselves, the organization is apolitical. So while we have people of all political persuasion and probably people who don't have any political persuasion, our organization welcomes everybody of every persuasion. Now, that said, on a personal capacity, I identify as conservative. And so in that sense, I'm considered Republican. That's how I identify. So, with that said, in as while we got politics into it, we do see this has become a highly politicized matter also. However, Gays Against Groomers, and I myself, in my capacity, would happily partner with even a Democrat, independent, non-political person who shares our views. So, for all intents and purposes, it really shouldn't be political. How we approach this matter, it should be common sense. You know, growing up, you would have, you could probably think back and you could imagine the horror in your mother's voice if she were to hear the kind of stuff that's being taught to kids, were it being taught to us. We know this is very foreign from our traditional culture, and yet in this day and age, more and more, we just don't care about things related to ethics or morals, values. All of that is becoming old fashioned, is becoming old hat tradition, even considered part of this outdated conservatism that some people want to do away with. And they don't realize that if you don't give your child a sound moral foundation at home, the school's going to give them one. The school's got a different idea of, like you're talking about, like what God is, or and so unfortunately, and Gays Against Groomers is also we're not a religious organization, though we all have our certain beliefs. But again, as an individual, from my perspective, who does believe in God, I really do feel like the way you opened it, that is kind of the crux of the problem. If we still had some of these moral teachings and things in those areas and schools, if we still did our Pledge of Allegiance and we still loved our country and we still valued sound thinking, kids wouldn't be sitting around the classroom all day cultivating their new sexual identity to go unleash it at their parents at home in the order to ultimately get to this point in the discussion where trans or die. You know, do you want a trans daughter or dead son sort of thing? And that's also one of the talking
That is
points
kind of
that's fed into
cult-like.
these kids after the social contagion. It is, and it's meant to scare the
That is
parents
kind of
into
cult-like.
submission, and many parents do submit into submission.
I'm glad
Yeah,
actually
it is very much a culty thing.
I'm glad you circled back to the about God, because it is a very important thing. Now, regardless of which religion you might consider yourself as, the taking away the identity of a person to cultivate their image and to cultivate their beliefs in a higher being, or even for atheists, for the greater science or for the greater humanity, whatever they would like to present themselves. To me, it's meaningless. If there is no God, then all of it is meaningless. But um, you could in atheism, I find in atheism you could have the circular logic that you do good, you do moral things. Why is it moral? Because it's good. How you know it's good? Because it betters your human beings. Well, why does it matter? But it doesn't matter why it doesn't. If it does or doesn't matter. The point is making you're making humanity better anyway. But that in and of itself, that cultivation of identity, that has been taken away largely, and it has been replaced with the that you yourself is God. You can defy your spirit, which would be, I mean, I guess it would be male or female. You could defy biology. You could defy all logic and common sense. You could defy thousands of years of history and now recreate yourself, your own image, and you could, instead of being in the image of God, be the image of yourself. And that is highly dangerous, in my opinion. But I'm glad. I just wanted to point that out. But here's the thing: I the reason why I asked about your political persuasion, I just wanted to know if you line up liberal or Democrat, because or liberal or conservative, because the way I think about the best way to get liberals to finally understand what we're trying to get at here, and a lot of them, they, as I said, they are low oxygen liberals. Oh, I'm sorry. And when I said earlier low oxygen liberals, I forgot to add something. It's because when the brain is deprived of oxygen, a person can't think straight. So there was this study done where a room of people were given a test, and they started writing down on whatever they had on the test, and slowly the room was sucked out all the oxygen. And after the test, the people, they were given their results, and they looked at what they answered. They couldn't believe what they answered. It just didn't make any sense. They were like, "I didn't write this." Yes, you did. But they weren't even able to think clearly while writing things down. So that's why I call them low oxygen liberals, because they are being bombarded by the media that the conservatives are trying to overthrow democracy, they're trying to overthrow the republic, they are racists. Look at this neo-Nazi group over there. Look at those guys over there. And so they see, oh well, everything is in danger. So they're always ready to give the government more power, and they are scared. They're scared of the other side of the aisle. So for them, I would say the best way to convince them of what is actually happening is to speak their language. Liberals are afraid, particularly, I mean, nowadays it's actually kind of mind-boggling. In the 90s, they were actually all the time, you couldn't stop hearing them denounce big pharma. Nowadays they are, so many of them have, who used to do it, now completely shill for big pharma. But you would say, listen, look at this. When you have a child and you start transition early, you make this much money, this amount of money, this is the gold mine. These children are not seen as human beings to big pharma. They're seen as a gold mine. So the entire frame the entire conversation, instead of that, instead of just about pure facts. Well, it's a boy. There is no, biologically it's a boy. Guess what? Facts don't care about your feelings, as Ben Shapiro likes to say, but guess what? Their feelings don't care about your facts. So instead of only saying pure facts, biologically speaking, they don't care. It just, they don't. You're right, you're correct, play it smart. Don't, you could be right till the I don't know, whatever happens. You could be right all the time, but it doesn't matter. So what I'm saying is, speak to them in their language. They are the big pharmaceutical companies. They're not trying to help your child. They're not trying to make sure that your child doesn't commit suicide. They're trying to convince your child to be something else, something they're not, and they're making money off of it. Convince them that there is a conspiracy, which there is, by the way, by big pharma and people who represent big pharmaceutical companies, that they want to sell all these drugs, all these dangerous castration drugs, um, poisonous chemicals. Why? Because they make money off of it. I think in the liberal mind, they'll be able to digest that much easier, and that will be a stepping stone for them to start seeing, wait a minute, this and this and this also doesn't make any sense. And from there, you got to give them, in other words, you got to give them the first step, let them take the first step, even though it's maybe not be the most convincing argument, but it is kind of convincing argument. But even if it were not, I would say give them something that they speak, something that um, they could understand, something that they could grasp. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's it's a great thinking. I think that's what we have to do is to find ways that we can uh, come to the table in a middle ground sense as far as speaking the same language and speaking to the concerns that they have or the way that they're seeing the world. I agree exactly with what you said. You know, their feelings don't care about facts, and of course, facts don't care about feelings. Um, and part of it seems like it is a bit of willful ignorance from the opponents of this issue. There's this these kind of points that you bring up have been shared, of course, in an individual conversation. It might be an effective approach for somebody who thinks the whole argument is based on some sort of homophobia or transphobia. As long as somebody can receive the idea that the formation of this as a theory, as a conspiracy theory, which a lot would take it. It is. I completely agree with you. It is what is happening.
It's not a
There are
theory.
people.
No, it is a
It's not a
conspiracy, not
theory.
a theory.
Right. Uh, but putting drawing the line between these points, some people who really want to believe this thing would say, "Oh, well, that's wishful thinking, or you're drawing these conclusions. You're drawing the wrong conclusions." It's not that the doctors get paid more, which is why they're perpetuating it, causing so many false converts, which is, of course, not going to enter in their head any more than the discussions of a detransitioner, but rather instead they will say, well, it's because now that the trans community can come out and be open and they've got a safe space and they're getting this gender affirming care, that's why they're all coming out of the woodwork, because they were always there. And so I think in one hand, somebody could see, what's happening with the medical industry ramping up, being symptomatic of servicing this new need. And on the other hand, we recognize that there are vulnerable kids who are making statements that they've been educated to say from television, friends, school, wherever, from society, that is actually at the root of um, this decision to walk into the clinic and give themselves over to these doctors who have their incentive. The kids have this incentive to fit in, to find
Peer
their place
pressure.
in life, yeah, or the peer pressure aspect, and they're going down this wrong route. And the doctor is at a place where, hey, I'm going to make money. If they're already here to do the thing, let me just clean it up, do the thing, get my money, and go. And yeah, it's money for a lot of these people. There are When we see some of these doctors who are speaking out, or psychiatrists, and they're talking about, I don't know if you saw the one that's kind of going around recently of an interview in Australia with one of the psychiatrists, doctor who worked at a gender affirming some child clinic, and there's this gender affirming initiative or a guideline that they go by that basically neuters her ability and to say anything other than you are what you think you are. And so, her speaking out led to her being kicked out. And this is a really good interview. I should probably send you the link, but it's showing you how if you're going to be a sensible doctor, you're going to have to push back. You're going to get pushed back, and you might even end up losing your license. And this is a day and age where speaking the truth comes at a price. It's not like the old days where you could speak it and nobody knew or cared. Now it's really contentious what side of a matter you're on, because it's the difference between, like you're saying, between somebody being a Nazi or not, or homophobic or not, or whatever, all these conclusions that have to be drawn. You just can't simply say things without conclusions being drawn about your other position. So it's a very dangerous time to stick up for the truth, but, um, you know, it's a heroic act, and we need everybody to stand together and do that.
When whenever anybody would call me homophobic, transphobic, just go down the list, and now they're probably for every pronoun there's another phobic. I just my reaction is that thanks for noticing. You know why? Because these people they're not interested in debate. They're not interested in actually making an argument. They just want to shut you up. You just mock them. Thanks for noticing. That's it. So, and when it comes to the question about racism, you are a racist or you're an anti-Semite. How do you know that what is the definition of a racist? Definition of a racist is a conservative winning a debate against a Democrat. And the definition of Nazi is, oh, he's definitely winning the debate. Mock them. Don't be scared of them because they are devoid of argument. So they use ad hominem attacks that are not even true. It's not like the attacks that they're shouting at you have any semblance of truth. So by defending yourself by saying, "Oh no, I'm not a transphobic. Oh no, I'm not homophobic. I'm not that." By default, you've now put yourself in the category that you kind of, in the eyes of the liberal, you kind of are now, because now have to defend yourself. Don't defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Just laugh it off and make it. Just take it away. When you try to defend yourself, you're giving it power. You're saying that there's some kernel of truth, and I have to defend myself against that. No, there's no kernel of truth, and I'm not even going to defend myself against it. You're just throwing out words. You're trying to throw out words, and it's not even going to stick. I'm Teflon, whatever. There is no. I'm not afraid of anything you have to say, and just watch them go mad. They'll probably say, "You see, I told you." Don't care about it. But the question is about why the kids? Why is it so important for these people to target specifically the kids? It used to be, um, it's privacy. What do you care? People do in their own bedroom. And I guess although I'm not a libertarian, I do have libertarian leanings. I guess my libertarian leanings would be like, you know what? It's not my business, and frankly, I don't want it to be my business. Okay, fine. I'm not gonna legislate that. But then it transformed into something completely different. Now you have to. Now they're gonna be the flags all over the area. Everywhere there are gonna be flags, and you have to celebrate it. And not only that, your kids have to now see it as well. And not only they have to see it, now we're gonna teach it to them. So why the kids?
Yeah, exactly. What's really happening is, in one hand, as we were talking about, as a God believing conservative, I don't believe in legislating morality on people. What's right for one person might not be right for another, and vice versa. We need to have society open enough where people can, they're free to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without suppressing uh, or marginalizing other people. On the other hand, the other side of this argument, we have a very forceful uh, situation where we got compelled speech. We're getting labeled as far right extremists or homophobic or whatever, and it's a very forceful convert or die, transform your thinking, align with my thinking, or now we're going to have a confrontation. It's no longer where we can just say, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, we'll sit over here. It's, we need to hash this out until everybody, you know, concludes that, you're, against this, because there's no way that you can, as far as being homophobic, because there's no way you can possibly just love everybody and then think that kids shouldn't be exposed to this without you being homophobic and transphobic. So, uh, what was the other part of your question? I apologize.
Why the kids? Why specifically target the kids? I would assume if it were really about privacy, you just stop there. You just okay, we got what we wanted. This is all we wanted. But no, apparently no. This is not all we wanted. There's a
Well,
whole host of other things that we want.
well, that's a real big thing that separates the LGB from the TQIA plus aspect. On one hand, you have gay people who are born seemingly normal, who have just this attraction to members of the same sex, and that was a time in America where that was very difficult to handle, and there's been a lot of acceptance coming around for just letting people be themselves, and that really was the main point of gay rights. That whole narrative has been hijacked by individuals who far exceed anything that was ever meant by LGB, and now includes people who want the same rights. They want to be treated the
Do
same
you
way.
do you believe it was actually hijacked, or this was always the plan? Because what I believe, it was always the plan. This was always liberalism builds itself upon it's the never-ending revolution. It's progressive by its nature. So this is where it progresses. Now, of course, there were well-intentioned, well-meaning people who are gay, and they just wanted the privacy. I'm sure there were, but as the movement itself, not the individual good people who just wanted that one thing. I'm talking about the movement itself is by its nature is liberal, is by its nature left wing. So seeing all the other things that has happened and all the other things build off of the first thing, I would say that it wasn't actually hijacked. This was always the plan. This was always where we would not only end up, but we will continue on from this point on. But it was always where they wanted to go. And I'm not actually only talking about gay people. I'm talking about the liberal world order, the people who are of that persuasion, of that ideology, who are not
Mhm.
necessarily gay, but they believe in that stuff. They believe in that
Yeah.
stuff. So they wanted to continuously push it through, continuously. And this was always the plan. The movement itself was always liberal. They were good people, of course, who just wanted the one thing. So what
I mean,
I believe that it was never hijacked. This was always the plan.
well, I will agree with you. I agree with everything you just said. With the initial founding of this movement, the founding documents, the individuals who were tied to it, ultimately at the end of the road, there are all kinds of disturbing, even pedophilic things are tied to uh, uh, this movement. What it started for people like me, regular people who are not jumping into the roots of the ideology, people who were jumping on for their piece that they actually agreed with, in spite of what we didn't know about its origins or we didn't know about its end game, was like you were saying, we wanted just basic civil rights, we wanted to be treated normally, and that was well and good enough for us. We thought, I'll jump on the train, it makes sense to have these rights, and then once we've got them, then we can be done with it. And then, once everybody's gay married and pride's still going on, and a lot of, the gay activism is, calmed down, people getting what they want, new generations are coming into it. And like you said, there are these underpinning aspects within the origins of the movement that bring in characters and people who we didn't traditionally associate with the LGB, who have come. And on one hand, I do say it's hijacked because, as far as the general public is concerned, the main people who were consciously involved, the narrative was treat gay people equally. Now, the founders of the movement and whatever was going on in their head and in those documents, most people don't know. We weren't signing on for that. We weren't agreeing. We weren't informed about that. That is a little known information, which is now becoming more obvious and more well known because it's becoming in our face. It's something that is affecting us. So, in this sense, it's not hijacked. But as far as how we associate as individuals, as gay people, to the degree that we subscribe to that gay pride flag as representation of our gay situation, it no longer resembles those issues. Now we have, this whole, dude, you got this whole arrow with the progress, the intersex, and all this trans stuff happening. And so these are really like, it's a totally different ball game. I think it
By the
was
way,
Vivek. Yeah,
the flag. I'm glad actually you brought it up, which I've neglected to mention. Which for some people might have gotten confused by my point that the people who are not necessarily gay but they're liberal and they agree with the entire movement, some people might get confused by what I mean. It's a gay movement. No, it's not. What is that flag? That flag is not only the colorful rainbow flag. Now it has all kinds of now different races and different persuasions and all of those other things. What is that? That is not a being black is not a sexual orientation. Am I missing something
it's
here? No, you're not missing anything. What's actually happening here is it's all liberalism. The ideology of being they turned it's amazing. They turned gay into being into an ideology. Now it is an ideology, a set of beliefs that you have to have, and it has a doctrine. It has a God, basically yourself. You recreate yourself with all these different pronouns. Which, by the way, another I'm gonna let you speak just a moment. I just want to point this last thing about pronouns, which I noticed. You see a lot of people that get very upset when you misgender them. No such thing, but you which, which is actually kind of funny when you think about it. If anybody were ever to call me a she, I'll just ignore it. I mean, like, what? Calling me a she? Okay, fine, whatever. Say whatever you have. But they get very mad. They can't. They lose everything, and they don't even do the surgery. Why? Why are they so upset? Because that's the only thing they have going for them. They recreated their image, and now they are God, and that pronoun is the proof that they are God. And if you deny it, you're denying that they're God. So they completely lose it. That's the one thing they tie their entire identity around this one thing. So that's why they lose it. It's so intrinsically tied to them that it's like denying that they actually exist, and um, you know, God could be vengeful from time to time. So anyway, you were saying,
Well, back to what we were talking about before, I do think that whether we are facing people calling us racist because we say something contrary to BLM, or they say that we're homophobic because we don't want porn in schools, or people are anti Semitic or anti anything, the reason for the name calling is to stigmatize the person in order to make them uh, one of the worst things you can call somebody is a racist. It hits to the heart of a person who loves people. Because when you make an accusation like that, you're slandering a person's whole outlook. You're labeling them, you're maligning them as a bigoted person. And people, hate labels like that. They hate to be stereotyped like that because our society in general is far and away against that. Before all this stuff around, BLM or the trans stuff came out, uh, I have black friends who never experienced any racism, and as a gay person, I haven't rarely ever experienced any homophobia in my life. So as far as I'm concerned, race relations, gay relations have never been better. Now all of a sudden we're bringing it back. We're stigmatizing everything you do with name calling. And so what we're really doing is bringing back homophobia. We're bringing back racism. We're not letting the idea die because now we're going to resurrect it to use it as an argument to win our points, and we're making everything about that. And so this gets a lot of people to shut up. That's why they say it, because people are scared to be seen in that light. And if somebody shouts racist, racist long enough, or homophobe, homophobe, the people around who don't even know why they're being called that are liable to think that about them, and that would be the worst case scenario. So you do see a lot of people kowtowing or bowing down to this ideology in fear of being labeled, one of these extremists, and that's the result of not having a backbone. You don't have any kahunas. You don't have a moral compass. The more of an independent thinker you are, like you were saying earlier, the more you can handle the kind of frivolous, slanderous things that are going to be launched at you just for saying the truth. And historically, even back in the biblical times, people have paid a price. The world has punished the truth tellers, And it's been a world dominated by lies. And so it's a heroic act to tell the truth nowadays. And um, and that's what people need to remember. It's like history will remember who sat down, who went along with a tacit agreement to get along, and then who spoke up, even in spite of uh, all the pushback. But the fact of the matter is, we're having this conversation. Most people do agree that this is insane. It's only the media misrepresenting how many people really feel this way that makes us think, oh, we might be one of the few, and everybody really wants it now. Most people don't want
Going off of that, um, actually, we you still haven't answered why specifically the children, but we'll get there in a
it.
moment.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Just a moment. Going off of that, what you just said about the people who speak the truth. I'm not sure if you're aware. Did you see what Matt Walsh had to say about Dylan Mulvaney? His words. What he had to say about him.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were a lot of conservatives who, so-called conservatives, who are what I call the feel-good conservatives. Oh, let's get along. Let's work together. Oh, let's have bipartisanship and all that. And what bothered me, and I stand firmly against all of those conservatives who take that position. Not particularly here. It's not that I stand against them on literally everything. Where there we agree, but I I have I have very much a lot of contempt for the people, for the so-called conservatives who are like, let's get along, let's be nicer and all that. What do you think the left has been doing all this time? How do you think they want the culture? You thought they were being nice this entire time, from the 50s up until, from the 60s actually, up until this point? They were never nice. They still own the culture. Niceness is not going to win you the culture. Kindness is an important thing. That's a different subject. But niceness is way overrated, and you're not going to win the culture. That's number one about niceness. Number two, you have to be precise. Matt Walsh articulated beautifully what had to be said. He was absolutely amazing on every single word that was said, and most of those conservatives who said that, oh, he's not nice, they said, well, he's correct, but I don't like how he said it. Um, I
Yeah.
stand firmly against those conservatives, because that's not how you win debates. Not by being nice, not by caving in, and not by trying to walk on eggshells. You have to be precise, you have to be blunt, you have to say exactly what has to be said. So,
I
what do you think about that? And right
Yeah.
after that, tell me what do you think about why the kids. But first on that.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem with, and I agree with you completely. It's, we used to call it creeping compromise. If we look at politically what 5 years ago would have been considered far left, it slid into the mainstream. It's now made itself center, and it took what was traditional and just maybe a slight right or conservative, and then it's moved what was just a little right over to the right, and what was you know far right is super far right. Everything has gone to the extreme. So we've just slid this whole scale over. We've normalized uh, all of these little things because of exactly what you're saying. We just try to be nice, and we're letting this go, we're letting that go, and let's try to find peace. And you're going to do that all the way up until the point when the world's completely destroyed. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. A man who does not have a cause for which he is willing to die is not fit to live. And what we have right now are a bunch of people who want to go along to get along, and they don't realize that's how we got here. It's a bunch of uh, willy nilly behavior and thinking that sold us down the river. As far as why the children, well, I almost don't know where to start. I think the first thing is uh, you got the next generation. You got them in their formidable years where they're forming themselves. When a decade or two goes by and you've got these generations out, all these adults sitting around right now that are pushing back against the government, it's going to be a totally different scene when you've run them through the this machine all the way up into adulthood. They're going to be used to the mandates. They're going to be used to the woke ideology. They're going to be used to the pronouns and the transgenderism, and all this is going to become old hat. They're never going to know a time like we have where this stuff was considered an aberration of sorts. And so the kids is the way that you're going to own the future. It's the way that you're going to get to parents, influencing parents to their children. I couldn't stand the gays or I couldn't stand the trans, and my child became, and I had a problem with it. Then I adapted to it. Now I'm with P flag, and parents for the love of their child will a lot of times will get over all kinds of crazy things. Some parents don't, and that's not good either. But when you're getting to this place where now we've got through the kids, we're able to affirm this lifestyle, we're able to integrate it into popular culture, into the next generation. I mean, that's where you got to go, the kids of the future. Um, Also, to your other point on pronouns, uh, that's also a very dangerous thing. It screws up the child identity. I don't know if you've ever seen, surely you've seen the gender unicorn, or the gay gender unicorn. And it's this diagram that was published in order to help
Which makes
kids
sense,
understand.
actually. Makes sense, kind of. Um, Disregarding the technical definition of unicorn, one horn, yes, there are animals that are technically unicorns because they have one horn. Yes, okay, fine. Disregarding that, unicorns don't exist, so it's a very good representation of the entire gender spectrum. It doesn't exist. Gender is not doesn't exist. And also cis, on that thing, I resent that completely, because the entire idea of saying somebody is cis, the entire point of that is to put it on the spectrum. The moment you say somebody is cis, that's when you took the binary and put it on a spectrum, and now you have to agree with all the others. So the entire, and I love what Elon Musk said. It's now going to be considered hate speech. Now, I'm not a fan of the idea of hate speech. There's no such thing. But if we're going to play this game, we should be playing this game the same way they are. Cis is hate speech. You're not going to be calling me cis. There's no such thing. I am what I am. I'm straight. That's it. I'm not gonna be playing this game. I'm cis. This is this word has never existed. Then suddenly, just to make yourself feel better, what happened to self-identification? You want to identify? I don't want to identify. Most people don't want to identify with that. Why are you saying no? This is what you are. No, you don't. No, you're now violating your own religion, I guess. Cult, we can say. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so that is the big thing, is they are, I mean, essentially, I don't know, demonizing, but yeah, they are trivializing the gender of the general public in order to squeeze all of their confusions or made up things or the fantasies, which there are instances of all these things. Granted, there's people who genuinely think that they're this, that, and the other, and they may genuinely be wrong. Of course, Gays Against Groomers specifically, we're not on the attack of full grown trans people who want to take that path. But if you are going to take that ideology or take that path, and you're going to try to spread that to kids, and you're going to sow into their heads that they are, this, that, or what was that? Was that you? Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, if that they are this weird sexuality, or they're like, if you've seen the queer spectrum and all the flags, it's like any kind of combination. It's like they really rule out the possibility of aberration to the point where did it go? And if you look, it's right under your nose. It's been saturated into all of these mainstream ideologies that they're serving up, because it used to be that there was an off limits. It used to be there was a line in the sand. It used to be there was an immoral, or there was a mental illness component. And now that we've absorbed all inappropriateness, all confusion, all aberration into our definition of a gender identification, it just corrupts the language. It corrupts the dichotomy of genderism. I mean, even as like an esoteric principle, the law of gender it really speaks to the polarity of a male and female, a sun and a moon, a positive and a negative dichotomy. And when you start adding in all these middle portions, it just it just undermines the whole state of the world, the whole paradigm of the world, and it really creates an open door where you can, oh, I'm an alien person. There's people who are dressing up as monsters, as creatures, as inanimate objects that they're identifying with, and they want to come out into the streets and they want to correct you and tell you, how dare you call me a woman? I am a goldfish self, person. My pronouns are goldfish, goldfish self, or whatever. And and it's ridiculous. They should be embarrassed to say it because this is a very strange thing that is coming out of their mouth. And but yet we do have some activists and some trans types who are taking it to the point where they're going on TikTok and bragging about how they're confusing, cis people. Like, go, oh, are you a they, them? And people who are so ready to apologize and oh, I'm sorry, what's your pronoun? They don't think nothing about leading them around and making a joke out of them. And so I think that that points to the insincerity of a lot of the people who are, messing with the people who are self-deceptively sincere, um, people who are giving over too much to these people to be kind, to be understanding. Um, you know, truth should be above love. And this is the thing they don't understand is they think that if I love you enough, we can squash out the truth of the matter. I can love you past the lie that you're living and that you're teaching. And that's no love at all. That is a love of evil. It's a love of chaos, and it's a negligence. And so we should be able to communicate the truth in love. And but that's a problem right now because, like you said, it's feelings over facts for so many people.
The way I see it about the going after the children specifically is because it is a virus. And we're talking about the ideology. We're not talking about being gay. For those low IQ people who are trying to get me on any word, oh, he said trying to sound transphobic or homophobic, whatever. We're talking about specifically the ideology is a virus, and viruses metastasize and they grow, and viruses learn to adapt. They try to go after the most vulnerable and live for and have the longest lifespan, right? So why? So this virus, this ideology, I guess, not I guess, I actually know what happens is it goes specifically to children because that's what viruses do. They try to have the longest lifespan, which would be a child, because a child theoretically would still have a long life ahead of oneself, but they also are contagious, and that's why it is a social contagion. So why the children? It is a virus. The ideology needs to be destroyed and utterly humiliated. The people who propagate it, specifically, not the victims. We're not talking about victims who don't know better. Those people need to be dealt with appropriately. But the people who know better, the doctors, the therapists, the politicians, they need to be utterly humiliated. Hopefully we can do that in the near future. It might not even be in our generation, because this has grown to be so terrible and so powerful as a force that I don't even know it's going to be within our generation. But it has to be stopped. And not only that, it goes after the children. So I guess the only way to combat that is to specifically bring God to the children first. You have to do that first. You have to introduce them to God. You have to get rid of that stupid 1965 ruling by the Supreme Court that you cannot talk about separation of church and state. There's no such thing. The founding fathers had never had that value. They never believed in separation of church and state. Only Thomas Jefferson, the least of my favorite of the founding fathers. I like all of them, but he's the least one that I like, and he is the least religious one. Said in a letter that there should be some kind of separation of church and state. And when he said it, he didn't even mean it that the church should be separated from the state. It's the state should be sorry, the state should be separated from the church. It's that the state cannot touch or interfere with what the church or church doctrine, and not with any religion. Let religion live. But he did not mean it as in, well, the state should be separate and only it should be more an atheistic um, non-religious sect. No, the state has to be religious. It has to have some kind of morality-based system. Otherwise, and I love these people who say you cannot. I just love it. You cannot legislate morality. Then you have to ask them the question: what do you think legislation is? Just by definition, it is legislating to one extent or another extent morality. It is saying that this is moral, this is immoral. So, what do you mean you can't legislate morality? Anyway, but so you'd have to introduce them a set of values and an identity within an identity made in the image of God to the children the before them. You have to instill them in a a set of values that they could rely on. Otherwise, they'll look elsewhere. And there are whole. This is multifaceted. It's not just okay. Just introduce God and everything will be fine. No, that's not how this works. You have to introduce God, which is one of the most important things in my opinion. But you also have to take away the children's phones. In my opinion, no child should have a smartphone. And let's say you turn 16, you could have a flip phone. You don't need a smartphone. I didn't have a smartphone. Let's see, I think till I was 20. Sorry, till I was 19, 20. I didn't have a till then. I didn't have a smartphone. No child needs to have a smartphone. They don't need to be connected on Instagram and Snapchat and all that stuff. It just doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. They can live a normal life. Let your children live a normal life. And furthermore, I also kind of resent the parents who post pictures of their children online. Online is not your personal album. It's online. It's forever. You do not want your children on Instagram. That's in my opinion. And maybe the word resent is a little harsh, but I it displeases me to see parents posting pictures of their children online. They if they can't consent to post their own pictures, why do you think you are the one who think that you could consent to that? But again, you're the parent. You get to make the rules. So I don't think a law should be enacted, but I don't like it. I think culturally it has to be made to understand to the parents that this is not okay. This is not a good idea. But here's one. This is going to be very controversial, very very controversial. But I'm interested in getting your point of view on this. So we've seen the people who want to mutilate children. They're pushing this thing, and let's make this clear: it is violent, right? It is a violent act to chop off genitals of children and even young adults, but it's pure violence, right? Yes, it takes place
Yeah.
in a medical setting and all that. Fine, fine. It doesn't matter. It's still violent. What does it matter how you chop off somebody's genitals? It's still violent. So they could. So what I thought is these people could call for violence against your children and enforce it by law, as we've seen in California and even in Canada. Right, they're now taking away children who identify as some place, and they're now um, giving them specific hormones to puberty blockers, so they could mutilate your child and they could call for it enacted by law, but you cannot. And I'm not calling for it. Let me make it very clear. I'm not calling for this, but you cannot say, you know what, when you see these people in the street, beat them up. I'm not calling for it. I denounce that. I'm calling for violence. But my point here is that they get a special right to call for violence against you and your children. They get a special right to say, this child should be, this child identifies this way, and therefore we should mutilate the child via puberty blockers or castration or any other way, any other taking cutting off genitals. They could do that in public without any repercussions, not only from the law, but also not from societally speaking, not from the society. And they are supposed to be protected. And if you even criticize them, then it's considered transphobic or whatever phobic. But you don't get to say, you know what, you're threatening me, I'm going to threaten you. No, I'm not calling for it. I want to make this
Hmm.
very clear, but I'm merely pointing out that we have created a uber right, a super right. They get to say one thing. They get to say that this should happen to children, but you don't get to say, if you do that, I'll meet you at the door with my gun. I'll meet you at the door. If you try to do something like this, you will have to pay the price.
Well, well, let me just say that it is correct to say that it is an act of violence to do this thing. It is trauma, or the capital T, that you are inflicting on that body, that perfectly healthy body, as though they needed to have a sword coming at them, chopping stuff off. However, precisely, I agree with you that in the sense that, right, they are calling for a kind of violence against the children, and it would not be tolerated in any other way. But I think there is a undertone to amount of patience that parents are having, because people are seeing it that way. They do feel like their kids are under attack. They are getting very outspoken and very agitated and frustrated. And if you, push people too far, there are people who will respond with violence back.
If not
And
now, in the future,
so,
definitely. I can
if
see
not,
I can see people.
some parents already have. There's parents who've, their kid was molested, their kid was followed into a bathroom by a man or something, and then the parents, they go and they take, justice into their own
If that
hands.
happens, by the way, if that
And
happens, and then I don't think I should be on that jury, because I don't know if I could vote. I could vote to acquit, to vote for guilty, regardless of how bad this parent might have, um, whatever violence he would have
well,
enacted. I don't know if I could say, yes, he molested your child, but you shouldn't do that. I can't. Technically, by law, yes, you shouldn't do that. You should wait for authorities, blah blah blah, all that, fine. But I don't know if me, as a human being, could say you're wrong. You are wrong in defending your child. You're wrong in showing a show of force against people who want to do your family harm. I don't know if I could actually say that.
well, that's the thing is, it used to be that there was crimes of passion, and there still are. Of course, defending yourself in this capacity nowadays would be seen more as, not hate speech, but actual, hate crime, in certain senses, depending on what happens. Of course, we don't want anybody to get hurt, and particularly kids. And what we're trying to do constructively is, there's a collective frustration, there is a collective rage that this is happening to kids. And, violence is not the answer. Violence is only going to, create a world of bloodshed and misery and sadness. So as long as we can, we have to use civil means of discussing these things, of, coming together ideologically and trying to solve this. We do have the media working against us, fueling hatred toward one side of the argument, and, really both sides of the argument, to the degree that the, two main political parties have been set against each other. But at the same time, there's a lot of, gaslighting, and there's in these things that really infuriate parents. When you talk about, your kids need to have their trans rights, or their sexual identity, or their pronouns, or the kids need to be exposed to, other sexualities and other types of people. The thing that's not being calculated by the opponents of this matter, because, they can only go down this path without a moral compass, and because of that, they can't understand why anybody would have any kind of reservation about compromising any of their beliefs. And what we were talking about earlier about compromising, it's like, it's not a matter of, oh, I'll just move over a gradient, I'll just move my position over a little bit and meet you halfway. It's like, I'm already at the line where if I cross this, I'm already sinning against myself, against my conscience, against the truth, against society. I can't cross this line just a little bit to make you happy without having done that. But for people who don't think that way, who really think in this hedonistic way that a person's pleasure and a person's sense of joy is the only thing that matters, this mammalian, animalistic, lower human side, I had an urge, I have a desire for, I want. There's so many of these dark, lower, egoistic qualities that they don't separate from their humanity. They self-identify with it. They become all ego. So, I mean, not to get too philosophical or religious about it, but you can't really get into the crux of this matter without exploring those, like, more abstract realms of thought, because this is not common sense for a lot of people. People who don't have this understanding of a moral world order. We talked about a liberal world order. Well, I subscribe also to, rather, to a moral world order, where if you do wrong, there's a karmic repercussion. I do believe in a judgment day. I do believe that what goes around comes around, and you do something right to somebody, good things happen. You do something wrong, So if you don't subscribe to any of that, then
There's why wouldn't you do anything and everything that you want? Why would you ever, you throw caution to the wind, you do what you feel like, you don't get in trouble, you die, and you got out scot free. For other people who really see things from a higher perspective, they hold themselves to these invisible laws that the other side mocks. You know, they mock the other side for, trying to be upright or to, maintain some moderation or dignity or whatever, because they see that as you're, following your invisible God or whatever the situation is, and they don't see any consequence to what they're doing. So, we're really at a catch 22 situation where you can't make somebody see your spiritual philosophical outlook. And on the other hand, they're not going to convince us to throw that away. So we're going to be at odds, which kind of reminds me of something that Vivek Swama, Swamarama said recently, the presidential candidate. He was
Vivek
asked about the gay
Ramaswamy.
issue, and he said, yeah, Ramaswamy. And he was asked about the gay issue, and he said, I believe that the LGBT are fundamentally at tension with the TQIA. And I think that's a great way to put it. There is a difference in the plight of a gay person than the plight of a transgender person. A gay person is looking for somebody to love in their body the way they are, who matches them. Transgender person doesn't know who they are. They don't feel like they're even in the right body. They're in this dysphoria. They're lost. And we're looking to put permanent solutions on this temporary problem. Something that with some education, they can walk them their way out of. I think it goes back to the thing of the God question, when that does leave society. Again, Gays Against Groomers, not political, we're not a religious organization, but we do know that there's a moral issue here, and most people are going to get their ideas of morality, whether you're into philosophy or some kind of spirituality or some kind of religion. If you don't have any of that, if you're only trusting on your own knowledge, uh, you're never going to have an knowledge that's higher than humans coming at you, that you're aspiring to, that you're measuring things up against. Everything is always going to be based on, well, how I feel today, or how does that affect me. It's not how does that affect the other person, or how does that affect society, or what does this have to do with morality at all. And so there's no consideration of those things, and we're speaking two different languages at the end of the day. And that is kind of where the argument is like really being fueled, because if somebody goes and makes a Christian argument or a religious argument for why this is wrong, the scientific, materialistic, natural scientific way of thinking nowadays is automatically going to say, well, that's based on this false premise of your subscription to a subjective God, which is a fantasy of yours, which you're using as a crutch, and all of these things. So they're going to dismiss any logic that's above human logic, anything that transcends, again, that hedonistic tendency in them. And so you can't really argue on that basis either. What you were talking about earlier is trying to find like common sense examples of where industries are working together to make this happen, in spite of what it's doing to kids, or in spite of the lack of good that it's doing. That could wake up some people who are really well-meaning. There's a verse that says, because you have not attained unto a love of the truth, God has sent a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. And right now, most of the world has not taken up and embraced a love of the truth itself. And so they do accept lies. They absorb them. They don't even know when they have them. And so, it's only for the independent thinkers and for the people who have a love of the truth that they're going to come to these conclusions that you yourself, that your listeners have come to, that us at Gays Against Groomers and everybody else who sees this for what it is seeing. Because it's not easy to hold the truth up in your head when the whole world surrounding you telling you it's a lie. You got to know that. You got to be strong in yourself. So
Well, I completely agree, and not only that, it's a very we have to be very proud, and I have to also thank the organization Gays Against Groomers for um, doing what they do. And we not only that, we need to expand. We need to expand much more upon that. It's not only about showing the videos. Oh, look how crazy these people are! Or look at how crazy these teachers are! Look at how mentally ill some of these other guys are, and it needs to be expanded into much more action and also some accountability. Because I do think not only fines. I've seen some people, some places they were able to enact on the school district some fines, and I'm like, that's I don't think fines is enough. If we see that these people are trying to transition, specifically they're trying to transition kids, most vulnerable upon among us, we should be able to imprison some of these people because they're doing it without the parents' consent. They're doing modifications to the body of a child that is harm and that is violent. It would be the same as if the teacher were beating up the child, in my point of view. Even as a matter of fact, teacher beating up the child is less worse. This is actually much worse because a teacher beating up a child, the child could still have a normal life afterwards. The wounds would heal. Any most I would I don't know the statistics, but I guess the vast majority of if something like that happens, the child still lives a normal life. There are no permanent damage, but this is permanent damage. The puberty blockers is permanent damage. The and all of the mentally uh, disastrous ideology that also scars the child. So I would say uh, that it's not enough to sue them only for them to pay a fine. The teachers who do that need to be sued and put in prison. Those who actually do it without the parents' consent. That's in my opinion. But I
Well, if I could just say something to that, I would generally agree. But the problem that we're having right now is that these is teachers are being backed not just by school and school policy, but in many cases by the state. And when the state has passed laws that protect these sorts of activities, then we find ourselves opposed to not just a teacher with her activist mentality, but a teacher with this activist mentality with all the support of the state behind them. And so it really does become like a David versus Goliath situation where you might be completely right. Well, like usually by default in this matters, you are completely right. But yet it is allowed to happen. It's a protected action. There's nothing you can do about it, and all of this. And so that's where, because the world's gone so far, this isn't like it's happening in schools and you can, and that's what we're trying to do, is to stop it where we can. But it's no longer a small issue where it's just like uh, happening here and there. It's now happening all over. It's being codified into law. This is not a fantasy. This is not a theory or whatever. This is happening, and your option does now go into the law. Now it's a legal thing. Now it's a political thing. So it's like now you got to get involved in politics. Now you got to physically take your kid out of school. You have to do something because the support is there. They do have police power that supports the law. So if the school board says this is the law, we can do it. And at some school boards, you got the FBI going after parents and stuff. Parents might be right, but they're just standing there and there's nothing they can do. So if we're not active at the point of reversing these decisions at the legal level, the governmental level, or if we're not physically doing something like homeschooling the kids or taking them to a school that does not do that, then we're kind of like, and a lot of people can't. Some people don't have the resources to do that. They got to work all day. They can't teach their kids. They are very dependent on the public education system, and they need it to act right. And when it's not, they have to compromise or really sell their kid out, give them over to society to become whatever they're going to be made into. That's really sad, but that's what's happening.
well, I guess the main point that needs to be said here is that not only parents, but we're talking about everybody and anybody who has a moral compass that actually works. Everybody needs to get involved in one way or another and culture is downstream of politics, but politics is also downstream of culture. So you have to not only make the arguments and not only have the debates and not only spread the awareness. Also, you have to have the right lawyers and the right judges, and by law enforce and legislate all whatever is necessary, all laws that needs to be put into place, put it into place and enforce it. And it might get uncomfortable, some people might start protesting. That's when you have to do it culturally and societally. You have to persuade minds. It's not only you enforce the law. It's not only that is a very important part, but also you gotta persuade minds. Otherwise, you because you can have your rule, but if you don't have the people on your side, you ultimately fall apart. So you have to push it through the laws, through the colleges, through the schools, through the culture, through society. Get the right people in. If you and this is the one thing, a bit of advice, and Dennis Prager disagrees with me on this. My advice is to people um, who are in colleges. They are now becoming the new doctors. They're becoming the new lawyers and all of that. The new judges. You're like, well, should I stand up for what I believe? No, don't. You are going to become the next lawyer. You're going to become the next doctor, the next judge. Get it. Get there. Get in there. Once you're there, then you could start standing up for whatever you have to believe in. Otherwise, you'll never get there because the left now controls all the facets of society, that all the levers of power, now they control it. You want to get into those places, you have to play the game, know where you stand, um, um, go to church just to reaffirm yourself, to cleanse yourself of the evils of society. But do not stand up for your beliefs if you know you're not going to get the job, because you want to be the next executive, you want to be the next guy. Now you're only in college, nobody's going to hear your message. Yes, you stood up for your principles fine, but as again, I'm not sure. I think it was Machiavelli who said that a person is not judged by their intentions, but by the sum they have achieved. I might be wrong on this, but it makes sense that he would say that. Anyway, but it's correct nonetheless. If you don't, you're now in college. I mean, I'm speaking to the person who's in college. You want to stand up for yourself. You're now in college. Nobody's gonna hear what you have to say. You stand up for your principles, but guess what? Now, if you would have been that lawyer, you would have been that judge, you would have been that doctor, you would have been that executive, you would have had much more sway, much more cultural influence. If you stand up then, now you actually have a presence. Now you actually have a force that could actually persuade people to agree with you. And now there is actually a voice that is talking. Otherwise, it's just a whisper. You don't want a whisper. You want a powerful voice.
No.
So I guess we could end here. Uh, I just want to thank you very much for being here, and I also want to ask you. So, where could people find you? Where could they want, if they want to reach out to you, they want to continue this discussion, or they want to get involved? Where did they reach you?
So you can reach us many places. First and foremost, we're going to be at gaysagainstgroomers.com. That's gaysagainstgroomers.com. If you want to join, you can go to gaysagainstgroomers.com/join. I recommend everybody add us to your Twitter, or your X now.
It's
and
Twitter.
your
It's Twitter. I don't care. It's Twitter.
Okay. So your Twitter, your Instagram, we have our main national pages for Gays Against Groomers, and then the Arizona chapter and all of our state chapters also have Twitters and Instagrams where we're posting a lot of content related to what's happening within our states. So if you're within Arizona or you're within any number of other states, go ahead, add them to your Twitter, add them to your Instagram, even if you're not part of the state, and then look at the content that's coming along. And then if you know, genspect.com is a really good resource for people who are struggling with, to actually help them find a path out of that, genspect. So yeah, between the Twitters and our website, you guys can get a hold of us. And if you find anything, if you see something weird happening at the school that you want Gays Against Groomers to do something about, if there's a protest or some activity that you need help with, you go to our website and you can submit a hot tip, and that'll go to the local chapter lead, and we can try to do something to help you make a change right where you're at.
Where could they find you personally if they want to reach out to you?
If you want to reach me personally, you can email me at robert@gaysagainstgroomers.com. I'm located in the Phoenix area, so if anybody is in that area, I'm always meeting up with people. If you're in Arizona, you want to join the chapter, go through those same old means. But yeah, just email me.
All right, and now it's my turn. Um, Anybody who listened this long, it's about 1 hour and 29 minutes. Anybody, I congratulate you because you're really interested in the subject and you're really interested in bettering the society. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at Aaron Politidoxy on Twitter or email me at politidoxy@gmail.com or Aaron Friedman on Instagram. The most important thing you could do is share the episode, share it for everybody. Uh, Also, leave please leave 5 stars. And I thank you very much for listening. And remember, my fellow radicals, stay political. All right.